So magic, which is a big cornerstone of fantasy, and means we're probably going to talk about some magic systems as well. But before we do, we should really define what magic is. It's an idea that is held with all cultures, and we have magical thinking, the idea of that if we think something or believe something, we're going to change the world around us. That can touch a lot of religions, and also part of psychology and anthropology and stuff examines how we sometimes think we can change the environment with just our thoughts, which is in a lot of ways what magic is. But when we discuss it in fantasy and the genre, the definition really is kind of simple. It is change wrought by unnatural means. And that sounds really, really simple, but there's a lot to unpack in it. The change itself is what the magic causes. It can either be to the environment, like a fireball coming out of your hands, or it can be to the self, make yourself stronger, hear better, make yourself psychic so that now you have knowledge, seen through things, that's basically what it is. It's causing some type of change to the world, the story world itself. Now the second part is unnatural. Unnatural means, but that means is unnatural to the audience, not to the characters themselves. The audience has to recognize that it's something that does not exist in our real world, hence it being in fantasy and speculative fiction and not being, well, the real world. Airbender has a great example in the very first episode. Just right off the bat, Katara is like, oh no, this is bending, it's not magic. So it means they have a concept of magic, which is to say something that is unnatural. Bending, on the other hand, is completely natural within the society and the world and the cultures and all that type of thing. So that's why we define, again, magic as unnatural by the audience's perspective. It's the same way that hard and soft is defined by the audience's perspective. Hard and soft magic systems. The characters themselves can understand every aspect of the magic itself, but if the audience doesn't understand it, it's still considered a soft system. Magic systems are often also usually exclusive in some form or fashion, as in only special kids can go to Hogwarts. It's very exclusatory, as in either some people have access to the materials or the time to learn it, or just inherently genetically better than other people. This is in opposition to technology, which is what's usually used in science fiction, which is kind of more democratic in that anyone picks up a ray gun, they can kind of use it. So that's what makes it a little different than magic, but that's a whole nother story, because different cultures have different understandings and that kind of thing, and different species and that sort of thing. Anyways, so exclusatory is something that's often there correlated with magic and magic systems, but it is not actually a component of magic. You can have a world like Benedict Patrick's Yarn World series, where everyone has some type of magic in them. Okay, so but magic is different than magic system. Magic is something that's just happened. It can just be strangeness, an unnatural occurrence, change the environment that is unnatural by us readers and the audience understanding it. It doesn't have to actually be a magic system. However, fantasy, as opposed to magical realism, where just magic can happen, weird things happen, one of the 4 C's of fantasy is consistency, which is kind of what makes it a system. So we often apply magic systems so that the magic can exist within the world and make sense to the audience on that hard to soft scale. And because of that, games have kind of been around for a while and have been hardening our concept of magic. So in the early forms of magic, Lord of the Rings and the books that were before it, things could just kind of happen. There wasn't really a specific system to it. But as our understanding of fantasy and the genre has evolved since then, we've had a lot of codifying of what magic can and can't do, which is, I think, a lot of the rise of the magic systems itself. And in my own personal research, I've noticed that magic systems kind of progress in the same way that fantasy conceits do. And since they progress in that manner, you can kind of see what systems are a system for the magic systems itself. And they follow the same kind of patterns of appearance, abilities, limitations, and then costs. And oddly enough, all those 4 that I noticed match up to Sanderson's 4 laws of magic, and they also line up with the 4 C's of world building. So I think this is something that I'm going to pursue further in a different book, but it's kind of just introducing it right now. Each one of these systems builds upon the one before it. So if you have an ability system, it uses the appearance, and if you have limitations, it builds upon appearance and abilities and uses both of those components before adding something new to it. Costs adds to all of those itself. And what's kind of cool is that this continuum from appearance, abilities, limitations, and cost goes along the soft to hard spectrum. And a magic system can be multiple ones in the a same system can be multiple of one, and we'll look at that in the force at the end of this. So the first one is appearance, which is like your softest kind of magic. So you got like 5 different types of these actually, and they correspond to Sanderson's law. His 4th law, which is make things awesome, and which is the 4 C's of compelling, which is the idea of making the world more wonderful, more awe-inspiring, and is what brings us to the fantasy genre in the first place. This is what the magic looks like. It is what it feels like. It's all the cool things about it, but without actually having to dig too deep into it. So you have kind of like your window dressing of water running upstream just because, hey, there's fairies in the area. Well, that's all you really need to do to make it seem kind of magical. But you can do a lot of things with the Saw system. You just can't solve problems in the story itself based on Sanderson's 1st law, even though this is kind of tied to his 4th law. So you can actually use magic to get the characters into trouble. They draw the sword from the stone, or like get a curse put upon them, and that kind of what kicks the story into gear. But if you use too much of it, you kind of have a chosen one, which is your Harry Potters and Luke Skywalkers, and there's some cheat that goes along with that one. They can, as Terry Hickson points out in his videos and book on world building, you can tie soft world building, which is this appearance-based, to character growth, so that they can unleash a new power in the finale, and it's okay. No Deus Ex Machina, because they grew as a character, so that's why they unlock this new power. The next one is abilities, which is a kind of a point system, and if you've ever played a video game, you're pretty familiar with the mana and the idea of that certain things cost, but this is not actually a cost system, because we just inherently know that small things, little abilities, cost a lot less than big abilities. They rank lower on the scale of things. So if I waved my fingers and sparkles showed up, that's a big, big difference than me calling down lightning to strike someone a mile away. So this system is all about the abilities, is what the powers can do, and spelling them out in more explicit forms. It usually involves like the damage it can do, or like the healing it can do, the range, its duration, how many people this affect, area effect. These are all game terms that we all kind of have absorbed from, even if we're not gamers ourselves. So this one kind of sits in either the middle. It's still soft if it's not made explicit, the point system, because there's kind of a point system. It doesn't even have to be explicit to the author, but the author sort of understands, or the creator understands, that this power is smaller than that power, so I can do it more times, and so if it's soft, we'll see, like Buffy used that a lot with Willow's powers, if you ever watched that show, which they also used a cost system, which we'll get to in just a second. But the ability/point system can also be the hardest of systems if all the points are made explicit, which is your realm of lit RPG and progression fantasy. The abilities and point, if I didn't say it already, they correspond to Sanderson's 1st law about hard and soft magic, which is, again, like when it's used as a soft one, it can't solve all the problems. Because you just assume the character always has another point, or they will reach deep within themselves to get more power, opposed to the hardest system where you're like, oh no, they have 13 mana points and this is what they're going to do to spend it, which is your lit RPG kind of thing, which is resource management. So again, either the hardest or kind of right in the middle of the softest. The next type is limitations and levels, and it builds upon the abilities and point system, as in like it takes all those things like what is the range, what is the duration, what is all that kind of thing, and it kind of sets them up in levels. And so at level 1 you can do these following spells, and kind of the cool thing about that is you unlock these abilities once you get to this next level, but once you unlock those abilities, they're usually kind of unlimited. And Sanderson uses this a lot, like the Mistborn, and yes, they do have to take their medals and stuff, but really it's like, well, if you're this, you get these powers, and you can use them, like, is mentioning like, the burning off medals, but they're really not. It's just, which we'll get to in a second, it's really how creatively they use them. Harry Potter is like just kind of blatant about it. It was like, at level 1, you were taught these following spells. At first year of school, these are the spells you learn. Second year, you're going to learn these. Third years, etc., etc. And then once they're getting limited by, well, I have to have my wand, I have to say the word properly, I have to do the right gesture. So it's a limitations-based system, but once you get past that hurdle and unlock those abilities, they're kind of unlimited. And what makes these kind of cool is that they usually face more powerful enemies. And so, the kids in Harry Potter, even though they're first or through seventh year or whatever, are facing adults who have mastered these powers and are much more powerful. And Voldemort, who is the most powerful, so always higher levels. And this is where Sanderson's second law in about the limitations and the creative use of their powers, which is your 4 C's of creativity. Then they have to use their Accio spells to summon their brooms to think around the problems itself. There's also like Genie from Aladdin. There's a different type of soft leveling system where I have all this unnatural power, but these are the rules I have to follow, like making deals with Fae and that kind of thing, and stories like that. And then again, it's a creative use of the power itself, where Aladdin tricks Genie into giving him getting him out of there without using up a wish, or you have to know the Fae's rules so that you can deal with them and that kind of thing. So it's creative use of the powers. Based on the levels, again, which are kind of unlimited once you reach and unlock those powers. The last one is cost, which I thought would be the most common form of magic, but it's not, and it does kind of, show us our kind of physics understanding of it, where you think there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction to magic itself. Magic can't just be free. And that really is the idea behind it, in that for stories, you want to create dilemma. So if you can just unlimitedly wave your wand and cast fireball, then that's not that great. But if there's something, that makes that more difficult, then the character can't just make that easy decision now to decide, do I want to do this or should I try something else? So the cost kind of brings it all back down to earth, and it can be used for limitations and, you can have a static cost where every time I use my power, I lose a memory, that kind of thing. Or then you can have a fluctuating cost, which is kind of tied back into all the other ones. So you have a point system or a level system, and then you're like, well, I really need them to do something more powerful right now. I'll add a cost to it. And a lot of these are kind of a cheat, which, you say, well, I can cast this spell that I shouldn't normally as long as I drink this potion of such and such, or I hold this special wand, or I go get these magical property, and I stand at this special place during the full eclipse. So what you're doing is you're making the magic more difficult. You're adding difficulties like, again, materials, time, extra time to cast the spell. You might be sacrificing your morality, you might be sacrificing a goat or a person to cast the spell, your sanity, etc., etc. So they can kind of tack these onto point systems. So Harry Potter's a great example. When you have your first year kids, well, they need to get in there and they need to, fool them, so they have Polyjuice Potion. Well, the potions themselves are a cost system where how are we going to get these kids to do these powerful things? Well, they're going to have to go get all these materials, and it's going to take them a really long time to put it together, and it's only going to last for a very short period of time. So that increases the limit of the story while still giving them much more power than they really should have been, as first-year students, to be able to change their form and that kind of thing. And so again, cost systems can be attacked onto limitations, and also cost are part of Sanderson's third law of expand on what you have, as in add on to those other ones, and also makes the world complete in the four C's, and that the author has thought out of these things, and so we can break our own rules if we do these things. So a system can be all of these, and a lot of times they start off very, very soft with just the appearance-based. Star Wars is a great example. In the first trilogy, there's not really any rules to it, especially in the first movie, where it's well, it's the Force that binds us. What does that mean? What can he do? Why did he turn into a ghost? So it's not really spelled out. It gets a little harder as time goes on. Luke's a chosen one who unlocks his powers at the end of the first one, where he chooses the Force. Then, in the games of Star Wars, there was a mana system where I have this many Force points and I can do this with it, or even the old dice role-playing game where this power is only going to take, I have 4 dice to roll to pull this off, and I only need to get 3, to do it, yada, 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 yada. I won't bore you with all that. Then in the prequels, it was kind of more of a limits and leveling system where they kind of spelled, even though it sounds like points, they spelled out the midi-chlorians, and so with this many midi-chlorians, they should be able to do this. Also, I can run fast whenever I really want to, or, I can sword fight and throw things. It became much more unlocked in the prequels themselves. And then finally in the cost system, which is in the last trilogy, which we really shouldn't spend too much time on, but all of a sudden out of nowhere, I used my powers too much, I died. So bad use of world building, but use of a cost at the end of it. So there you go. This magic just changed by unnatural means, and follows a progression of appearance, abilities, limitations, and then cost. And now I'm trying something new to, instead of doing 2 videos a week, I'm just going to be doing one where I take this idea and then expand it. So I will be back in just a second and we will build a magic system using all 4 of these. So here we are just a few minutes later. Took me enough time to get the website up. Chaotic Shiny is what I use for all my magic systems just because I don't really want to think about them myself, just because I don't want to waste my story ideas on these little videos. It sounded terrible. Anyways, I've got it set to generate 5 ideas. I'm going to pick one of them, and then I'm going to show you an appearance, abilities, limitations, and cost version of that magic system. So let us see what we got. I just clicked the button. All right, let's use the first one. Practitioners of this approach to magic are disliked by animals. It uses amulets and spellcasting. Earth, curses, and stealth are strongly associated with it. Yeah. So I will be back in just a few minutes to you. It's going to be about an hour for me, and see what I can do with that. So here we are 11 minutes in later, and this might be a new record for me, and because magic isn't really easy. I don't know why people are saying they're so hard. This was just kind of a random one. It was interesting because it was animals don't like them. They use earth, stealth, and curses, and amulets. Okay, it's actually pretty cool. I think I came up with something pretty fun. So anyways, taking those random things, we're going to break it down, this very 11-minute broken out system. And first one is appearance. And again, so appearance are the things that we're going to, how's the audience going to experience it? That's when we're talking about the experience, about appearance. So it's going to be the physical amulets themselves. What are they going to look like? Are they big? Are they small? How intricate? What kind of glyphs are used on them? What kind of writing system? Are they scrawled in? Are they, stamped? Are they painted on? So that's a lot of it. So, and we can use the appearance in the soft system of like, oh, that's a glyph that means this, because it has those words in it, and they're Nordic, or they're Egyptian, or et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the other one is how they look when they're used, so kind of the particle effects for like video games. So, do they glow? Do they not reflect light? What are the things that make the amulets themselves, or the people using them, special? Since stealth is one of them, we're probably not going to make them look like anything. All right, so that's just some of the basic appearance things that we would think about for this system. We could, have the person using the amulet and just like, oh, he's carrying this amulet, it's really powerful, that's all we really need to know, that's why he has this power. It's very soft, the villain has it, so it makes it more powerful, which I didn't discuss earlier, but is a very important part. So you should read the book whenever it comes out, because it'll point out why the Emperor could use Force Lightning at the end of Return of the Jedi, even though they had not been introduced before. It was in the finale that it was introduced, but we didn't care about that new power. Anyways, it's part of the magic system itself. The abilities for it is going to build on the appearance. Again, what does the amulet look like? Well, now we're going to look at what the amulets can do. And I broke them into 3 categories, and I gave 3 powers for each one of the types of powers. There's a chart that I have about how powers kind of branch out. This is Sanderson's 3rd law, I think, of extrapolate kind of thing. So anyways, hopefully that's up on the screen. So abilities, like the earth powers, I'm going to say there's a level. I don't know when I'm saying level 1, like I'm just giving it a 1 point, because then it's a low level spell of who stood there on the earth if you have this specific amulet. The second unit is going to be like you can eat earth as food. So, and then the third one is you can pass through the earth, like the old Vampire the Masquerade kind of thing, where you just so that one's much more powerful, so it's a 3. So just kind of think of it, even though it sounds like I'm saying levels, it's just the idea that the smaller abilities are less pointed than the other ones. Curse, this one's pretty easy because, I make this amulet, and if I have it, then it'll make this person, or if I leave it on the person or something like that, they will ache. They'll have like a toothache or something like that. Annoying, but not really, just, I've got this headache, it won't go away. The 2 version, that was number 1, 2 of it would be like, oh, it's harm, like, oh, my stomach is just killing me, I think I'm about to puke, or I am puking all the time, It is impacting my life and it's making things more difficult, but it's not life-threatening. But you know, like it's gonna be hard to swing a sword when I'm doubled over with, you know, and then number 3, which would be the most powerful of them, would be death. Like make that amulet, make them touch it, they die, or just make the voodoo doll and take off its head, they die. You know, that kind of thing. So most powerful, 3. Stealth, 1 would be like it hides your footfalls when you're holding this amulet. You know, you can stomp around and no one's gonna hear it. The 2, a little slightly more powerful version of it is you will not be noticed in a crowd no matter what you're wearing. People just will not pay attention to you. And 3rd would be straight up invisibility. Like I can pick things up, throw things, you know, opposed to the 2 where no one notices me in the crowd unless I throw a rock at you. You know, so that kind of thing. So 2, not as powerful as 3, which is straight up invisibility. So building on those, then we have our level system, and you know, so we could do like written out as like at level 1 or the first year or initiate, you know, whatever. They learn to read the glyphs so they can identify a glyph. I looked at it like, oh, that glyph helps me eat earth. You know, I may not be able to use it or I may not be able to make it, but I can recognize it. Then you can do kind of a point system where like, oh, level 1, you know, they can fashion a 1-pointed thing. You know, make an amulet worth of 1 point, and you know, at level 2 they can make, you know, 2 1-point amulets or a 2-point amulet. 3, you know, they can have 3 points to work with. So you can kind of do it that way. You don't have to spell it out exactly, but the idea of like, well, I have 4 points to work with, so I can build 4 1-point or 2 2-point. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's once you have that level, and it's usually a level system is based kind of on understanding, like in Harry Potter, like you've only been taught these certain ones, so it's unlocking. You know, the mentors only teach them this when they, you know, gathered enough information that, you know, you're worthy of it. I'm going to teach you this level 3 spell. You know, so it converts like that, where, you know, there you can only learn a level 3 spell when someone teaches it. You know, but it's imparted to them anyways. It's when you get that information and you unlock those abilities. Then the cost system, we have 2 kinds we can do with that. We just do a static cost. One of the weird things about this magic system is animals don't like them, so we can work that into it. So we have a static cost of that every time they build an amulet, they have to kill an animal. They have to sacrifice the animal to get the power for the amulet. So it explains why animals don't like them. You know, so that's a static cost. We can also do have it built in materials and time. It takes a long time to build an amulet. It takes, you know, 3 days to build an amulet of just constant control. It takes 10 hours to build an amulet, and you're going to need iron and a special kind of, you know, covalite, the stone, which is just a really cool stone, by the way, and, you know, something like that, 6 quartz crystals, etc., etc. So it's an easy way to have a static kind of cost for that of, well, I can't just draw an amulet on a piece of paper and it's an amulet. You have to have the actual components of it. And now remember that the cost is there to create dilemma for it, to make things more difficult for the characters, if that makes any sense, because that's the heart of drama, is how things are more difficult. So making rare materials and stuff is a great one. And then we can cheat it kind of in like, oh, well, we're going to need to make an amulet that can raise the dead. Like, wow, that is a level 4 ability. I've never seen anything like that. How are we going to pull it off? We're only level 2. You know, well, you know, we can kind of be like, well, the information has been lost, so we're going to have to go find this special text. You know, well, that's a quest. Now you have a quest to do part of this, which is kind of the fun part of the cost system, is that you can make a story out of the costs themselves. Part of the dilemma can be, oh, it takes weeks to do this, and the enemy is coming in 4 days. How are we going to do this? Or another one would be a special material. Well, again, you have a quest to have to go steal that, you know, special material from the guarded enemy, and that's how you're going to make this amulet. Or you know, the whole clan has to get together and concentrate all their magic to do it, and 2 of them hate each other, so we're going to have to get them back together. So that's kind of the thing about how cost is, lets you cheat and lets you do more things than you should do with your system, but at the same time it builds plot points as well as creates dilemma for the characters. So it's not just, here's another amulet, like those things cost something, so it's going to take some work. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. That was a quickie. Yeah, it's 20 minutes later since when I started. That's magic, and magic systems is a very rough thing. I'm still feeling this idea out, but I think I'm onto something. I think it has some legs. I hope you can use it to build some better worlds.